Up next, we have Miss Sophia Rowland, a Senior Product Manager here at SAS, who will be presenting using SAS Model Manager to deploy models. And if we have time at the end of the session today, we'll open it up for Q&A. All right, over to you.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. And just to get a thumbs up, can you hear me all right? Perfect. Today, I want to walk through how you can take the models that you have trained and built on SAS Viya Workbench and get them into SAS Model Manager. For today's session, I want to start with just a brief introduction of SAS Viya Workbench and SAS Model Manager. Then I want to chat about how we can get our SAS models from SAS Viya Workbench to SAS Model Manager using proc register model. But don't worry, I haven't forgot about our Python modelers. I would like to also chat about Python SAS ETL and how that can help you take your Python developed models and get them into Model Manager from any Python interface. And I'm going to end today by just giving an overview of all the cool things you can do with those models once they are in SAS Model Manager. First, what is SAS Viya Workbench? In short, SAS Viya Workbench is an on-demand compute environment that can quickly spin up SAS and Python runtimes, and most recently now, R runtimes as well, and they feature SAS's cutting-edge analytics. The compute is elastic, it's self-provisioned, and they have interfaces available in Workbench like Visual Studio Code and a Jupyter Notebook, again with both SAS, Python, and R runtimes. And I do want to note that while SAS Viya Workbench is a separate environment than SAS Viya, the two can very easily be connected. Now, what is SAS Model Manager? SAS Model Manager is the tooling on SAS Viya that supports ModelOps and MLOps. So SAS Model Manager is on Viya, and it is running from a separate environment from SAS Viya Workbench, but of course we can easily integrate the two together. Model Manager features a model repository where models can be developed by a variety of tools and come together where they can be compared, tested, managed, deployed to a wide variety of different environments, as well as monitored over time. We do have our model cards available in SAS Model Manager, and our model cards do offer a nutrition health label for your model so that you can understand how your model is performing and make better decisions about usage of that model. Now, I really think of SAS Model Manager as a hub for models. Models do arrive from SAS Model Manager from a variety of sources, from a variety of tools. That might be a button in the Model Studio user interface. That might be through macro code in SAS Studio. That might just be importing the zip file or the SBK or the PMML file into Model Manager from the Model Manager import button. But we also have programmatic means as well. So if you're programming in Python, you can use the open source package Python SAS ETL. If you're programming in R, there's an open source package R SAS ETL as well. And from Model Manager, this is where models head to their destinations. Of course, they are your champion models, the ones that you think are the best fit for that case. And you may deploy them to production environments that are executing against data in batch in a database. You might deploy them to and expose a REST API endpoint so you can integrate that model into other systems and services. Or you might containerize that model and put that model into your container registry. And we do have integrations with other tools in the SAS Viya stack, from intelligent decisioning, event stream processing, model risk management, and workflow manager. Now, SAS Viya Workbench and Python are two sources of models that we import from. So when you are using SAS Viya Workbench to develop SAS models, you can use the proc register model to get those models into Model Manager. From any Python development environment, you would use Python SAS ETL. So I'm going to start with the SAS models, and then we'll jump into the Python models. So when you train models in SAS code, there are typically two types of scoring assets that you create: an analytical store, also known as an A store, or a data step code file. Now, it's important to keep these in mind when you're using proc register model, because there is a slight difference here between the two codes that we see above us. So if you're using analytical store, you're going to use the A store option. If you have a data step file, you're going to use the code file option, but everything else is pretty similar there. And what you're also going to see is that you're going to be pushing these models to a SAS Viya environment, and we're just going to be specifying that information there. I do want to jump into an example of each. So let's start about connecting your SAS notebooks on Workbench to SAS Viya. All right, so after we have configured our SAS Viya environment to accept traffic, we're going to start by using the SAS Viya CLI that's already pre-configured on Workbench to generate our authorization token. So this token is what allows us to move those models to SAS Model Manager, and I'm just simply taking and creating my Viya profile. I'm going to just say full JSON here, enable text. All right. Next, we are going to create an access code, and that access code is going to give us our access token. So we would run this command here, and it's going to open up that Viya environment that we specified, and we're going to log into that Viya environment using our login credentials. So control and click, open. I've already logged into that environment. This is the access code. That means I'm authorized to access SAS Viya because I have a login. I just copy that there. You'll see I have a token saved. That's my authorization token, and that's what's going to allow me to communicate with SAS Viya. And I'm just going to grab that token. I will say tokens are typically configured to last for about an hour. If you would like a longer time, you need to speak to your administrator to get a longer life for your access token. Now I'm just going to save this token for easy use inside this macro here called myToken. That way I don't have to type in that long token string. I'm just going to run this macro and then call that token via myToken. All right, that was saved. So what I'm going to be doing next here is popping up into this example. I'm saving my server. The project ID here is a project that I've already built on SAS Model Manager that I want my models to go into. And then I'm just running through a quick example here to create both my data step model and my model that's going to create an analytical store. This one is a binary classification model using log select. That's going to create a data step code file for me. And I'm going to create a variety of assessment metrics as I'm registering that model. So I'm going to score my data, and I'm going to get that scored data in a specific format before I pass it to proc SS model, or proc register model, so that it will create those really rich assessment metrics about that model during the time of training. Just really nice metadata to collect for our next part of the process. All right, this is our proc register model. So you'll see I've specified my OAuth token via myToken. I'm using my other macros there. And this is wrapping up the score code, wrapping up those assessment metrics from my Viya Workbench, communicating to SAS Viya Model Manager, and pushing my modeling assets to SAS Model Manager. So that model will be available in Model Manager in just a few seconds. There we go. We got the green check. Now, before we jump into Model Manager to see those models, just going to do that gradient boosting model so that you can see the differences between the two options. So this is our gradient boosting, save state. We're saving it as an analytical store or a store file. I'm downloading that to my Workbench. Now, the analytical store has a lot of really rich metadata about the modeling process in it. If you've programmed in Python, you can think of it almost like an advanced pickle file. It has a lot more data, but it is a binary representation of that model. And you'll see very similar. The only difference between the other lines of code besides my name and algorithm is that I'm using the store model option here. All right, that's registered. So we'll have two models in SAS Model Manager ready to go. So let's actually take a peek in that Model Manager project. I named this one, I think, Workbench Salary. Yep. And there's the gradient boosting and logistic regression in SAS Model Manager, ready to be compared, managed, tested, deployed, and monitored. And we have a start of our model card here. Remember, our model cards are created as you manage and manage your models with SAS Viya. So there's a few pieces here that we can fill out in Model Manager as we start to manage that model. All right, we will go on. So before we jump into Model Manager and what we can do to manage our models there, I want to talk about the Python aspect of things. Now, I think of Python SAS ETL as a bridge between our Python data scientists and our engineers that are putting those models into production. And we want to make that handoff as easy as possible so that we can take those models and leverage them for decision making with fewer hiccups. So I want to talk about Python SAS ETL and how it takes those models from any Python environment, not just the one that we see on Workbench, into SAS Model Manager. So here is my Jupyter notebook. If you've used the Viya ML, I'm going to create an example using Viya ML here, as well as an example using scikit-learn, so you can see just a few of those differences. With our scikit-learn package, you're going to be getting a pickle file as your binary representation of the file, but with our SAS Viya ML package, you can actually generate that analytical store just like you could previously. And again, that A store has a lot of rich metadata in it so that we get a lot more information. Now, my authentication method's a little different. I'm just going to log in here and create a session and a connection. So passing it my username, my password, my host, and then just asking for a session with SAS Viya. So slightly different login method if you are using Python from SAS. And here I'm going to register. Up ahead, I did my Python model. So I'm generating a lot of metadata here around that model. So what inputs does it expect? What outputs does it generate? How was it performing at the time of training? I'm generating those metrics so that I have them available in SAS Model Manager. But again, with the A-star file, that has a lot of that metadata already wrapped in. So I'm going to tap into that so I can register that model in fewer steps. And so we can see that executing. I got my successful text, and then as a good steward, I like to close my connections. Now we'll be able to open up Model Manager. I put them into this project, so we have a couple of examples, and they are executable models, so I can actually go ahead and create a score test and generate those models. That is one of the nice things about Python SAS ETL, is that it does help with the writing of the score code for your models. And just running this quick tree real fast, and it did execute successfully. So we do have a model that executes. All right, so we've taken and we've registered quite a few different models from SAS Viya Workbench into SAS Model Manager. Let's talk about some of the things you can do with those models once they're in Model Manager. I'm going into my Workbench salary project. I've also trained a SAS tree and a scikit-learn tree in a very similar method that we saw for the other project. I didn't quite like my names, so I'm going to just start renaming them so that it fits the naming convention. These are some of the things that you can do when you start managing your models. So just doing a quick rename here, and then I'm actually going to pop open this decision tree that I trained in scikit-learn so you can kind of see all the different pieces that are filled out in the model card upon registration. So I got a lot about how the model was trained, and that was why we generated all those assessment metrics so that we had that understanding of the model performance at the time of training. I'm missing a few things here. So one is thresholds. What are my cutoffs for what is a good model performance, and when do I need to take action for that model? So I'm just going to fill out this metadata here, and you'll see my KPI alert rules. So we do have a few options. We have accuracy-based KPI alert rules, so this lets me know, is my model's accuracy within acceptable means? If not, you'll see that inside the model card, it's going to flash bright red. We can also do metrics about distribution changes, so are my input distributions changing over time? And there also is fairness and bias, but I do need to mark which variables are going to be assessed for fairness and bias, and I do that in my variables tab. When you mark a variable as one that you want to assess for bias, it does not have to be an input to that model. It could just be data that you have available so that you can test, is my model treating different groups differently, or are they pretty similar? So I've added both sex and gender as my assess for bias variables so that I can understand, is my model treating groups differently? And I'm just going to go ahead and just make sure I have that. So pretty flexible in creating these KPIs to specify what is acceptable performance for your model across these metrics. And then I have my model usage section here, so you're going to see me start typing these things out, and it's going to be really specifying how that model should be used, how that model should not be used, any considerations around that model usage that is important for someone to know. This is going to be heavily rooted in your use case in your understanding of how that model was trained. And so we're just going to add that here, and it's going to show up in the model card. It'll also be available on the project, so if anyone has questions when they come in and they search and they think, do I want to use this model for my use case, they can come and see, well, perhaps there's a limitation that makes me less inclined to use that model. And then the last thing is I'm just going to put myself as the responsible party, so I'll be the one that people come to if they have questions about the model. Scoring, so I can create these score tests just to make sure that my model is working as expected before that model goes into production. So I select my model version, I select what data I would like to score test to execute on, and then I click run. And now what's going on is this, we're just going to run and score that data set with that model. And I'm just going to do a quick review to see is there anything odd happening. If that's kosher and I'm happy, I can put that model into production, and I do have a wide variety of different production environments that are available for that model. So here, this one's the micro analytics service that exposes a REST API endpoint for that model that's hosted on SAS Viya. So if you're building up an application or a service, you send your data to that REST API endpoint and you get that response back. It's very, very quick, so that if you're doing something like loan applications, you can get that score from that probability of that model really quickly. And then we have performance monitoring. So we are going to see how our model performs across multiple time periods here and continue to ensure that that model is working as expected. So we have metrics here about the input variable distributions. You'll see things like population stability index, feature contribution index. We also can do these distributions on the output variables, so your predicted probability is an option here as well. And if you do have metrics around, or if you do have the actual values, you can do the performance. This one, our data scientists are going to glare at that chart and realize that that model has clearly decayed in by Q4, and it is a good time to refresh that model. Brand new in performance monitoring is the addition of fairness monitoring, so we can look and see, again, is our model treating different classes differently based on the average prediction or the average performance. And so you can slice it and dice it across all the different time periods, but there's metrics like group unfairness index there as well. All right, we've done quite a bit, but we've filled out our model card. So we can see all of these different pieces here from how the model was performing at the time of training, as well as how that model is performing over time. You can see our cutoffs here. For our performance in the last quarter, that model is not performing great. So we can make really good decisions about whether or not we want to use that model, or perhaps we want to refresh that project. Now, if you take anything away from this session, SAS Model Manager does integrate with models from a variety of different tools so that you can build out your well-defined, your governed ModelOps and MLOps process for how those models end up being used to affect decision making. All right, there is still quite a bit to learn here at SAS Innovate. We're just about lunchtime on the second day. So there's going to be sessions about Workbench and bias detection coming up. There's going to be one about CI/CD in SAS Viya that looked very interesting. Our friends from the data ethics practice are going to be doing a deep dive into getting model cards for Python models from SAS Viya Workbench, so that one should be fun. I'm going to be hosting a brain date about model cards, so I'm happy to explain deeper into model cards, but this is also a time to hear from y'all about what you're looking for in the next iterations of model cards. So please do sign up. That's going to be, I think, on Thursday. And I think we have a few minutes for questions, but of course, I'm going to be at the ModelOps booth for most of Innovate, so do swing by if you want to chat. I'll be there with one of our fantastic data scientists named Mila, so we could have some really great conversations. But are there any questions? All right, well, if not, I hope you all have a wonderful lunch and a wonderful Innovate, and if anything pops up, you can find me at the ModelOps booth. Thank you.